Welcome to another live stream. It's Christmas Eve. Yes, it is. And hopefully I found you in a good place. If not, you're not alone. And I've mentioned before that on holidays, targets deal with a lot of different things. And we're going to talk about isolation. We're going to talk about gaslighting. We're going to talk about a lot of things. It's hard to come up with a title. And one of the biggest issues that targets deal with is being triggered. And within the framework of harassment, organized stalking, illegal surveillance, sabotage, all kinds of little gifts. You can become estranged from your family, your social circle, and you will find yourself isolated. And unfortunately, that's something that you're going to be reminded of on holidays. A lot of targets will talk about going no contact. And I've talked about that before. It's very complicated. But if your family is involved in your harassment, maybe I should have put that in the title, but I just I didn't want to be morbid, which that's part of the gaslighting. Yeah, it's your fault now. We'll talk about that. But if your family is involved in that, it's a whole new problem. It's one thing to deal with organized stalking and harassment, and it's another thing to deal with it concerning those different associations, what I've talked about when it comes to the trauma invasion that target individuals deal with, and the amalgamation and reciprocity of all those associations to trigger them, right? And of course, holidays, birthdays, an exponential framework of different environmental stimuli will trigger the victim. Why? Because it's all associated, and that's what they try to create. And I've mentioned that before. You have a spider web of associations that will keep the target in a constant state of fight or flight, or if nothing else, they're just controlling them emotionally. And it's hard to deal with because, as I've mentioned many, many, many times, that once you have a trauma scenario in your life, all those things are triggers now. It's not it's not about being smart. It's not about being tough. It's simply a fact. It is a science that is used against targeted individuals to get them in a place where they can be dysregulated, to get them in a place where they can be traumatized, and that will be an automatic imprint upon their mind, a type of mental tattoo that has entered into their world. And now it's going to have an automatic reaction within their neurological, psychological, and physiological makeup. And it's like I said, I think it was in the last live stream or the live stream before that, do not underestimate the science. And of course, that was in the invasion of the psyche, because they're not asking permission. They are breaking down the door, they're knocking down the wall, and they're coming into your world. And it's so easy to underestimate what's going on. You think they just want their pound of flesh. You think they want some kind of control. It's mischief. It's just people wanting to flex, playing a little game with you. But it's so much more than that. Okay, and it's scientific. And there's a lot of things that are behind it. I mean, it depends on what you're dealing with. As a target, it could be a government program. It could be people who are literally feeding on you, feeding on that narcissistic supply, working for their spiritual handlers. I've mentioned that too. When you get into the occult, a lot of targets will talk about witchcraft. A lot of targets will talk about the secret societies. And they just try to figure out, how is this stuff working? Because, it might seem like, 100 people or maybe 1,000 people or beyond that are involved in this, depending on what you're doing as a target, because it's typical for anyone who's dealing with this type of persecution to try to remedy it by leaving the geographic location, by going incognito, trying to adopt a type of low profile, gray rock the situation to try to find homeostasis, to try to regain a sense of peace and control around the world you live in, that environmental authority that they take away when they come in. And I've talked about that before. You have the pyramid of life. They come in, they do break-ins, they use directed conversations against targeted individuals to the point where they are dysregulated, they are triggered. No one should know these things. Are they watching me? Have they have they broken into the house, installed cameras? Is this some type of spiritual wickedness that I'm not aware of? Individuals who are in communion with spiritual entities. And, when you get into remote viewing and all those other things, it's pretty much the same. Okay. And I've talked about that you have targets who are dealing with everything. Not everybody's dealing with that. It kind of frustrates me when people try to spin this in a particular way, to where, I've mentioned the chosen thing or whatever. And there's nothing wrong with the idea that people are persecuted for their faith. That happens. Okay. But you see, these days in our modern world, there's a whole lot more going on, right? And people are being experimented on by the government. They're being used as vessels of wrath for the fraternities, which go, within the framework of the economic and social strata of the world that we live in. And that's when you get into the the Freemasons, the Illuminati, the Rosicrucians, the Council, the 300. Actually, I think it's the Committee of 300, the Council of 33, and then you get into other aspects of that where you get into the purebloods. And you can see these things. They're out there. In fact, I've mentioned that before. We can go through that list where you have, the Stasi, Zertzung techniques being used to gaslight and dysregulate individuals so they can be discredited. That's really what it amounts to, and drive them crazy, and then use them as vessels of wrath for political, social, or economic leverage. And that's just the way it is. And it always begins the same way. But as I said before, when you traumatize someone, when a targeted individual is processing that information, it's easy to forget what's really happening. There's a motive. There's a science around this. Targeted individuals are taken into a place where they are, they're accused of being paranoid. But is it really paranoia? If people are harassing you, if you are being surveilled, if people are sabotaging you at your workplace, if your family has turned against you, is that paranoia? No, it's not. That's the warranted suspicion created by organized stalking and harassment, a perceived unwarranted paranoia, right? Hijacking the physiological and psychological mechanisms of the individual, asymmetrical warfare involving covert methodology designed to stimulate hypervigilance within the targeted individual, within the victim, using random assaults, synchronized attacks, directed conversations, break-ins, food tampering, covert poisoning, covert drugging, and the infiltration into the life of the target, maybe with a honeypot, maybe other things are going on, where the target finally realizes that someone in their intimate circle is nothing more than a splinter cell, an agent, or at least, if nothing else, they've been hijacked. They have been manipulated in some way to attack the targeted individual and create that type of maximized environmental pressure to create that plausible deniability. When the target says anything, you're just crazy. You're nuts. All right. But of course, it's easy to do because the methodology is very, very simple. And I've mentioned that with the sensitization of the targeted individual to form associations, right, concerning subjective stimuli in their environment or the attacks that happen to them, actions, words, phrases, environmental stimuli, covert harassment, and secret communication with the target. Once an individual has been sensitized these themes, and I've talked about that before, you can really make somebody look nuts, right? Because the conceptual framework of any normal individual, and that's quote unquote, that stuff couldn't happen. Why would they spend so much money or time harassing you? Are you special? Of course, that's always something that a target will deal with. Anytime they try to get help, they might confide in their family or maybe a close friend in their social circle, but it just defies the conceptual framework that is there, right? And it gives that much more plausible deniability. Using those associations, that stimuli, you can use it within combination of different traumatizing activities, attacks, subtle techniques for an unconsensual invasion into the target's mind, invasion of their psyche, right? Conditioning them, and not without reciprocity to create those exponential amalgamated associations to trigger the target. Getting back to the point, on holidays, targeted individuals are, some of you guys that are out there, and God bless you, by the way. There are a lot of things for us to be thankful for. And I've mentioned before, if you're in one of those difficult places, maybe you're in a hotel, maybe you're living in your vehicle, maybe you're wondering what your family is thinking about you. God sees you, and his face is shining down upon you, and he consistently and predictably wants to have mercy and bless you. And that's our hope, right? The sensitization creates that plausible deniability. And then that moves in to how the target is processing information around them, right? And it's easy to read into things, and the problem with what targets deal with is that it's so intense and obvious at first that you couldn't miss it if you tried. But then once you're aware of what's happening, and like I said, a lot of targets are being persecuted within their family, trying to figure out where they should go no contact, creates a problem. I haven't deviated away from that. We're just coming around to it, that the subtle methodology involved will either get them to question their own sanity or get people around them to believe the disinformation. And I've mentioned before that a lot of targets will deal with disinformation. They will deal with the smearing or the smear campaign, where it's just set up all around them, and the sequelae of the harassment breaking them down, making it difficult for them to concentrate, to sleep, to eat, to hold a job. And then, you mix that together. Well, you have yourself a pretty scientific equation, don't you? All right. And so they are estranged from their family. The people that are not involved, they believe the lie. They believe the campaign. The individuals who know, who have been either compromised or manipulated, they are reinforced within the tyranny of the onslaught of that stalking, harassment, and gaslighting. And usually the target will get to the place where, this, I can't take this anymore. Should I just go no contact? And I've mentioned it's exponential. There's a lot of things involved when family members become part of the harassment. Thank God not all of you are dealing with that, right? I've met targets that they don't know. There's things that kind of, make them wonder. They're a little confused. I don't know if this person said something, but, but then there's others who the aggression is so obvious that, it's you can no longer ignore the elephant in the middle of the room. It creates a very surreal environment for the target individual. The get together on Christmas morning or whatever for Christmas dinner or Thanksgiving or whatever. Pick your holiday. The awkward feeling, the whispers, right? The fake, the whole scenario around it. Like I've talked about that before. That now, if you're dealing with that, it's like you're the Hollywood target on an individual. You just have to pretend like everything's okay, or do you? And so targets will go into that place where I just can't take it anymore. Sometimes it goes beyond that, where they are afflicted, and it's similar to what targets deal with in the victimization of narcissist abuse, where they are isolated and they become dependent upon the attackers. Family are good for that. Well, I don't know. Maybe we should use some tough love on you. I don't know if I can stand to see you live in a box, a cardboard box somewhere in an alley. Maybe we'll throw you a few $100s for a hotel room or something. I don't know. But by the way, you're crazy. I don't know what you're talking about. And a lot of targets are faced with that. But, if they do have to come crawling back as after dealing with the sabotage, the tyranny, and the workplace harassment, their social circle, they've been excommunicated. All these things are going on, and it creates a real nasty scenario for targets who are, dealing with that. I mean, they set it up. They set it up that way. They will surround targets with those things, even if it's not your family. They'll do it, and then with the plausible deniability, they will try to confront you with your own destitution within the framework of gaslighting and manipulation with accusation methodology to say, what's wrong with you? Well, you sure are acting weird, right? I dare you to try to explain yourself at that point. Of course, what are they going to do? They're going to minimize you. They're going to play all these little games. We're just trying to help you. And you got to see how this works, and the exponential plausible deniability just starts to tighten down. Because, like I said, the elephant is in the middle of the room. Oh, what's the matter? Are you anticipating something? With that warranted suspicion created by sensitization involving personal information and other things to harass the target and sabotage them and trigger them and create these associations. And now it just starts to multiply. That reciprocity is exponential. But when you go no contact with your family, well, yeah, you might not notice anything for a year or two, or maybe more. but then someone passes away or something else happens. And then the other issue that comes out of it is that, you're validating the disinformation. They're all saying you're crazy, and now you're not showing up. You're rabbit holing. You're going from job to job. You're living below the median income. Oh, they were such a talented person. Can't imagine. It's too bad. Maybe they're telling everybody you're on drugs. A lot of times targets will deal with this stuff where there's a setup, and a lot of people will say they're lifelong targets, right? And they are. But what do they do? They might get you to the psychiatrist early. And I've mentioned before that when you deal with some of these subtle tactics that a lot of people out there in the world are dealing with, they don't even know they're being messed with. They literally believe that they've got some kind of, disorder or something, that they're just getting depressed, that they're just anxious, that they just don't know how to integrate the social circle that is around them within the framework of the social dynamics of the hive that is out there. And after targeted individuals are subjected to this nightmare, and I mentioned this many, many times, you're finally awakened to what's really going on. It's not that you've entered into the Twilight Zone. It's not that you're on a Truman Show. You always were, I guess, depending on how you want to process that. Some of that's just an illusion. Not everybody knows what's going on, but more people than you thought, right? Within this framework, depending on who you are, you could be dealing with a government program. You could be dealing with something that's spiritual. And in the case that you are, you could be dealing with all of it. You try to run, you try to leave, you try to do this, you try to do that. You can't get away from it. It's in your family. It's your workplace. You move from the other job, you go to another job. You travel to the other side of the United States. You travel to another country. And for some reason, everybody's got your number. If you got your head on your shoulders, you're not losing your mind. But it's a rough road, right? It's a rough road, and a lot of targets don't make it. Going excommunicado with your family, that causes a lot more problems. I mean, setting up boundaries and, just trying to, not take an extreme position is probably your best bet. And I mentioned that before, that, they're going to try to label you. And even when you get into debates about different topics or whatever, that's usually the ad hominem technique that is used against someone. They will say, this is what's going on, and they will label you. They will put some kind of title upon you. And whether or not you play into their strategy makes a big difference. And like I said, targets are dealing with enough. They're dealing with all of it. And, that just gives leverage to the perpetrators. You don't want to do that. I'm going to go out in the comments and see who's here. And hopefully you guys can hear me. Emmanuel Godson, welcome to the live stream. Sentinel, welcome. Felix, welcome to the live stream. Furthou 8, welcome. Okay. Okay, and Felix is dealing with something where he has extrapolated information that the law enforcement is involved, and they've I don't know, I've mentioned that too. Dealing with this whole thing is that there is a framework out there that can involve anyone, and I've talked about the strategies used against targets to where they will come to conclusions that may or may not be accurate. And we'll use the first responders as an example. And I've mentioned this many, many times, right? I have to get some seltzer here. My throat's getting kind of dry. Sorry, guys. You know, it helps to prevent the clearing of my throat, and it's just I've got that throat nodule. Hold on. It's more annoying to hear someone slurping coffee on a live stream. You ever watch those guys? I gotta get a drink of coffee. Or sorry, I'm not gonna do that to you. But when you deal with targets who are, you see the videos. I've seen them where you got the cops, the fire department, and everything, and the lights are flashing, and they're like, oh, this is a setup for me, or they're after me, or I was at an accident scene, and I had a type of emotional reaction and maybe even a premonition before that, and then all of a sudden this whole thing is there, and it was a day later or whatever. I went around the corner or whatever happened, and then to make it even more confusing for the target, one of the first responders or the police or whatever, the fire department, they used that methodology within their sensitization, might even been real aggressive. And so the proposition is that that's who's doing it now. Or maybe it was a Freemason, or maybe it was someone involved in the occult, or maybe it was someone involved in a particular business. You see those guys, the FedEx people are after me. You don't know. I saw it, and they said it. And I'm like, okay, well, I believe you. The thing that you need to remember, though, is that, the hive or the framework that's out there is exponential. It doesn't just have, it's like when you assume that everybody's working for the FBI or the CIA or the local cop shop or the fire department or whatever, municipality or group of individuals you want to put within that framework. But it can be any one of them. It can be any one of them. It's like when people try to say, well, it's this particular race that is ruining the world. Well, no, that's not going to happen. And it's part of the handlers that are out there controlling everything to cause that type of propositional tyranny to get people to attack each other and manipulate them. Class warfare, Saul Alinsky 101. Ideological possession through infiltration, Antonio Gramsci, right? Disinformation and propaganda, Operation Mockingbird. Subject the population to disturbing material, drugs, and psychic driving through repetition, MK Ultra. It's all there. And then you get the Zertzung. You get people who are targeted, and it's just that much more intense. And I've mentioned before that MK Ultra was like MK Ultra was an intense version of what everybody is subjected to now, and it's gone beyond that with the technology that it's frighteningly. We have no idea. I mean, there's people talking about stuff out there, and I really don't know. I mean, it to me, it goes beyond that, and I've talked about that before. That you want to talk about nanotechnology. You could look at the temptation of Christ, right, where he's out fasting, and the adversary comes and says, well, if you're the Son of God, why don't you turn these rocks into bread? What do you think he was at? What was he saying? He understood those things. Neutrons, protons, electrons. Jesus turned a little ball of dirt into an eyeball. He can do that. He can do that. We don't know how he does that. He created everything. You get into the doctrine of the Trinity. You want to talk about nanotechnology? You want to talk about, people try to separate The spiritual dimension from technology is you're really whacked out. Like it's some kind of animal that's hovering in the corner of your house in a shadow. Well, they've that's where all the technology comes from. If they're breaking people down, if they're tearing people down so that they can inhabit them or devour them or whatever they're going to do, don't think for a minute that they're not using technology. You've mentioned that before. Where do you think we got the laptops and all this stuff and the fiber optic technology and everything else? And there's people that speculate that that CERN is going to open up some kind of porthole to hell. They don't need that. You know what they're trying to figure out? They are trying to break down all the little particles and all the little, bits and pieces that make up space time, the created order that you live in, and the other things that we can't see. There's multiple dimensions, by the way. Yeah. We're like the AM radio of the galaxy. There's Wi-Fi and all kinds of things out there. You get into Tesla and the stuff that he was figuring out. Yeah. Good luck with that. And so what do they want to do? They don't want to open up a porthole, right? The abyss or whatever. No, they're not going to do it. What do they want? They want to figure out how to make all this stuff work. They want to break it down, and they want to learn how to play with all this stuff. And I'm going to guarantee you this: God has designed this place in a way where He is the ultimate authority and ruler, extravaganza number one. No one is going to be able to do it because they're created beings, right? Good luck with that, right? Oh, you want freedom? You want to escape? Yeah, okay. No, you're moving into now you've been taken captive. Now you're a prisoner. No, that's not how this works. Freedom? Well, you want some freedom, huh? Okay. Well, if you move away from the light, you move away from your creator, you're going to die. If you start moving, it's like the stuff in the secret societies where, they do these things and rituals. And I've talked about that. I've heard other targets, make these videos where they will illustrate the fact that when these individuals engage in this type of behavior, they're literally selling their souls. They're giving themselves over to become prisoners because they are legally bound themselves into the framework that I talked about before, that you cannot transgress those things without having a penalty. You can't break the laws of the universe and expect to just walk away from that, right? And that's where you get the us and them, right? That's where you have the targets out there that are saying, well, they threatened me. They said if I didn't join that they were going to drive me crazy. Well, I've heard that kind of stuff too. You better listen. How's that working out for you? Better us than you. Okay, good luck. And it's environmental tyranny to break down people. But getting back into that experiment with CERN and, smashing all these, atoms together at the speed of light or beyond, they want to figure that stuff out. They want to have control over everything. They're not going to be able to do it though, right? They're not going to be able to do that. So, but they've probably figured some things out. Isn't that scary? Who knows what the hell they're doing? Who knows what they're using? And we're always the last to find out. It's usually not it's not something that is pleasant. We'll just put it that way. A lot of targets are dealing with a lot of different symptoms, and sometimes it involves directed energy weapons and other forms of technology that is used to break the victim down. The spiritual dimension is beyond sophisticated. That's really what frustrates me the most. Oh, you're talking about ghouls and ghosts and goblins. No, I'm not. That's not what's going on. There's a basic framework to the created order. Okay. And, you know, we're all processing the information within the salient landscape of the created order through the same programming or methodology. Those themes are exponential. Don't be fooled by that. I'm cooking dinner right now. Give me a little bit of time here. Eventually, we're going to take this channel to the next level, guys. And I'll have like bumper music and everything. We'll do like 2, 3, 4 hour shows. And by the way, I'd like to thank everybody out there who's liked and subscribed and become a member of the channel. Because if I had the means and the time, I would do this full time. I'd be taking calls. I'd be doing your regular coast to coast show every night for you on tap, maybe even with live music. Okay. And, but like I said, in many live streams before this, I just don't have the financial means to do that. And, when you get people who become a member to the channel, for the price of a cup of coffee per month, you add that together, and not only are you gaining awareness out there in the community, but you're making options available where we can have something where we can, just rather than have an avatar up here and you guys listening to me rant and rave for an hour or two, we could have a real show. Because the thing about isolation for targeted individuals is that it's you're dealing with constant subjection. You're excommunicated from your family, and I've mentioned this many times with dialectic behavioral therapy or other things, is that you just got to snap out of it. Sometimes you need affirmation, and sometimes you just need to know that you're not alone. There are millions of people around the world right now dealing with the same thing that you were dealing with, and maybe even far worse. And I mentioned before that a lot of targets don't make it through the first 2 to 5 years. Hold on 1 minute. Let me go back into the comments here. And Sentinel says it's a waste of energy to confront them. So many disposable pawns. I would agree with that 100%. But they want you to. That's part of the mechanism that goes along with that plausible deniability. You're overreacting. What are you talking about anyway? What's your problem? What? You're what? You've been dealing with what? You think I'm what? And of course, they just sit back and laugh at the target. And it's like engaging with an online troll. You're just getting the life sucked out of you. It's basic vampire, methodology at that point. Moving on along here. Peace on earth. Welcome to the live stream. Okay, I'm just reading through this stuff here. Okay. And Sentinel says it's not paranoia if you're really being targeted. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And that's the dilemma that all targets have, because, like I said, the conceptual framework of people out there, they don't know this. It's you can't have this type of weapon, and it's a weapon, by the way. It's a very, very effective weapon. And when I made that video, Invasion of the Psyche, watch it if you haven't. Um, people underestimate this stuff, right? And if everybody knew, obviously it wouldn't work, right? If there were, and targets believe it's like everybody knows. No, there's a lot of people that don't, but there's a whole lot of people that do, right? And it's just like all the other things out there. When you see the false teachers, or you see the propaganda, or the scams in psychiatry, and everything else, and the things that I can't mention, and people think that everything is safe, effective, and they got to do it, and so on and so forth, and that they can trust the information out there, and then they find out it's not. They find out there are certain things out there that people have woken up to, especially since the pandemic, that would challenge that conceptual framework, to where maybe I don't know what's going on. Maybe there's something to this. Wait a minute. That whole thing about chemtrails is real? Out in Mojave County, there's people with barium in their blood, and whoa. Oh, wait a minute here. Wait a minute. There really is technology out there that enables someone to put voices in your head? Wait a minute. Really? Ignorance. And then on top of that, people are so busy running around like chickens with their head cut off. And I'm not blaming them. It's just designed that way. It's just designed and manufactured slavery. And that's how you create, the elite out there, the infrastructure that we talked about earlier, the Freemasons, the Illuminati, the Rosicrucians, the Committee of 300, the Council of 33, the Scottish Rite, the Royals, right? You get up into the strata with that, and you have information that other people don't have. That's how you do it. Everybody's just a bunch of dumb, worker slaves, and they're kept that way, and they're dumbed down, they're malnourished, they're sleep deprived, they are being emotionally manipulated. Speculatively, they're dealing with even technology involving the lighting, artificial lighting that is around them, and the screens of their televisions, phones, and everything else, LED lights that are just literally destroying their body. I don't know if you guys have looked into that stuff. It's just beyond some of the things, and that was back in MK Ultra, where they figured that whole thing out. Really? Oh no, there's the targeted individuals are just crazy. Oh, you're just whacked out. No, there's a bunch of proof that individuals just like you and all the other people out there listening to this are being targeted, however that works out, whether it's by the occult, whether it's by some type of government program, whether it's by the elites who want to make you a vessel of wrath, or however that works. Maybe by your family, and I've seen that happen too, because you get into the occult, and there's individuals out there that they've described their satanic ritual abuse. They've described these weird things that have happened to them, and the only answer that you can come up with, and I've even contacted Gary Wayne and other individuals to see what they had to say about this stuff, is that in those groups, some of those fraternities that we mentioned and the occult, that the only way that they can appease those entities that are ruling over them, and they are, by the way, they're real. It's not goose and goals and ghosts and everything else. The creature up in the corner in the shadow. It's these beings are intelligent. They are dimensional, extra dimensional entities, and there's a legal framework out there. And when they do these things, they are, like I said earlier, the people are forfeiting their future eternal life, the possibility that God has given everyone to have eternal life through the truth and through faith in Christ, and to join this cabal of madness, destruction, death, and condemnation. And these individuals are, it's like they're a sacrifice. Menacide, gaslighting, covert drugging and poisoning, sabotage. And I mentioned this in the beginning of the video, is that there's, some of you guys out there are discredited at an early age. They made sure to take you to that psychiatrist, to mention certain things to the doctor, depending on who you are. Some people, their family's not involved in this whole thing. But there are people out there who deal with that kind of thing. And even if it's not your family, well, the mechanism is out there anyway, isn't it? Because now with the DSM, whatever number is on that now, anybody out there within the world with any regular reaction to the stimuli, manipulation, and environmental tyranny that's in the landscape of the world that we live in is mentally ill in some form or fashion, right? You need therapy. You need drugs. You need to get your head examined. And then, the thing is that, when you get into that whole thing, what do they get out of it, right? That's what a lot of targets will talk about. Well, they're vampires. They're getting paid. They're getting data through experimentation. Well, yeah. Oh, of course they are. All the above, right? Some people have speculated that, you get these different frequencies and you get these spiritual vampires. Really, I don't think that's what it is. I think it all goes from the top down, and just like within the framework of the occult and the secret societies, that the handlers, the big boys at the top, who have all the cake, the candy, and the control, they decide who gets that stuff to propagate those delusions for max effectiveness in deceiving people, taking them captive, not only just within their compromise, but within their mind, the tyranny in their mind. And I've talked about that before. When you get into the secret societies, especially when you get into, a lot of people talk about the Freemasons, you move up into the Illuminati, which supposedly was created to destroy the church. And then you get into the Rosicrucians, who carry this information throughout the ages. What information? The information that I've been referencing, right? All the technology, all that stuff. And some of that comes from outside of space-time. A lot of targets are dealing with things that are just so freaky, you don't even want to say anything about it. You're dealing with people that seemingly know future events. They know what you're thinking. And it's not all just some government thing where these computers are out there figuring it out. Who knows what they've got? There is that. They're trying to figure that stuff out. Who knows what they've got? Because, I've mentioned this before, you're nothing but a fleshly computer. Your brain is receiving data through electrical stimuli and chemical sensory stimuli. All you have to do is use light, translate that within a framework of binary code of some sort, and you can kind of decipher that at the very least. So I'm not shooting that down, but what I'm saying is it's beyond that. And people are being deceived. People are being indoctrinated, and they're being manipulated within a framework with a motive, not only to take them captive, within their compromises, but within their mind. And like I said, with the secret societies, and even when you get into astrology and all that, when you get into the Dead Sea Scrolls, by the way, I have that book of Melchizedek on audio form. And if you're one of those people that, they'll attack you when you're trying to study, by the way. I don't know what it is when I'm trying to read the Bible or do something. It's just, I get tired, or I just can't, and you'll get irritated or whatever. Just, sometimes what I'll do is I'll play like a simulator game on the PlayStation, and I'll listen to some of these audiobooks of the Dead Sea Scrolls, or maybe even sermons or whatever, and you extrapolate information. You extrapolate that information, and you put that within the framework of your conceptual landscape, right? But you start figuring these things out. When you get into the book of Melchizedek, the rebellion happened long before Earth was created, and it goes into the incident with Cain and Abel as well too. Interesting stuff. And then you move into the takeover of Zion, created off the Sagittarius arm of the belt of Orion, Earth. The cosmos, by the way, December 25th is not the birthday of Christ, according to the NASA star charts. And when you get into the Essenes and the order of Zadok, you have September 11th, AD 3, the convergence of Jupiter and Regulus. And that's how the disciples of probably Daniel and the Essenes, which when you get into the Dead Sea Scroll, a lot of people will try to bastardize that and call it mysticism or whatever. But John the Baptist was an Essene, as far as I know. How did they know? Because they knew how to read the Bible. They knew the prophecies. They were taught of God and of the prophets, and that's of course John 6:45. Jesus told them, "You guys don't know who I am," and they had all the information. Why? The decree in 444 BCE, right? And then you have 490 years of disobedience with the prophecies of Jeremiah, minus 7 years, which is 483 years, times 0.9857, because in the Babylonian exile, what happened? They went over to the lunar calendar, threw everything off. That was the beginning of the Antichrist, by the way. And now they couldn't calculate the times and seasons. They didn't know what the prophets were talking about, and they were given a spirit of stupor. That's the judicial hardening of the Israelites. The judgment that was displayed within that trip to the potter's house when Jeremiah the prophet went down there. But what happened? Well, that's 32 AD. That's all you have to do. 490 years of disobedience through the successions of judgment in Deuteronomy, the 5 suggestions. You're going to be chastised, and then you're going to be scattered. Right? 483 years times 0.9857 minus 444 BCE is 32 AD. They should have known, right? And that there's all kinds of things going on. But getting back to the point, you can see when the Lord was born. You can look back in the NASA star charts, the fulfillment of Revelations 12, the Regulus and Jupiter converging on that time clock. Because when you get into the Dead Sea Scrolls and you look at the book of Melchizedek, that's what this is. That's the second heaven. That's when you look at a picture of the Hubble telescope and people are trying to say this is all just a big bang or whatever. No. That was created. And Zion, or the planet Earth, which we haven't found anyone else out there with life. And some people say there's aliens. I think that's demonic. And a lot of people have talked about that when they have that abduction experience, that they are dealing with even an agenda within the military or in the deep state, in the rogue factions of the government, to experiment on individuals and make them believe that it was just aliens. That makes more sense to me. But you have that information in there. It's in the playlist. If you guys want to check that out, that's something you need to know. You need to know about the rebellion. What was the Garden of Eden about? It's all in there. Go look at it. Wonderful stuff. Like I said, I try to put this stuff out there for you guys. People want awareness. They want solutions. And it's not to say that people out there that are making videos about, whatever's happening in their environment, they're trying to, gain awareness. They're doing this, but you gotta be careful how you do this, because you end up sounding crazy. Taking videos of people with one headlight to the individuals out there in the conceptual framework of the indoctrination and obfuscation of what's really going on. You think they're going to care about that? You think they're going to care about somebody with a headlight out or wearing a red shirt or something else, or a bunch of people like I've referenced earlier at an accident scene, and they're supposed to believe that somehow that they set this accident scene up for you? They didn't. And that goes in. Well, I'm not saying that things aren't set up for targets, but here's the thing. You are led into these places, and these themes are always there. And I've talked about that before, that when you deal with this theme-based harassment, everything is correlated together within a scientific and mathematical equation, and everything from timing to future events can come into play. And you can be led into a place with presuppositions inserted into your mind through sensitization and environmental tyranny and harassment of exponential means and psychological warfare, where you process information and come to the conclusion that they want. And now you think all the fire, workers are after you, and the FedEx people are chasing you around. You look like a nut because you don't understand what's happening. It's always been there. It's all there. It's always been there. But now you're coming to these propositions and conclusions and presuppositions created through that framework of sensitization and subjection through the environmental tyranny. And they're winning. They're getting you. They're making you believe things that aren't true. Not all the first responders, not all the fire department, not all the cops, not all the government. They're not all in on it. Those things are there to manipulate you, discredit you, blind you, and make you vulnerable to the tactics and the mechanisms of the science of gangstalking. I'm going to go back into the comments. Okay. And Felix says, and I'm way back in the comments, by the way, just record wherever you go. I don't think that's a bad idea. I don't think it's a bad idea, because if nothing else, if you put it this way, if you're a new target that's dealing with all this stuff and you happen to just run across this channel, thank God. Most targets wait quite a while before they start playing those games. And then by then they're sensitized and they've got plausible deniability, and they just mess with you, and everything you record makes you look like a complete nutcase. Right? Like I said, one headlight or maybe whatever, people coughing or whatever, and you look crazy. But if you happen to be stumbling in here as a new targeted individual, Felix is right. You put that body cam on. Hopefully, you get one that's covert if you can. There's a lot of technology out there Maybe I'll start putting links to that kind of stuff up on the channel. Like I said, I'd love to take this to the next level. The creepy part is it seems like they know. How messed up is that? It's like the things that targets deal with in the privacy of their own home or whatever, and they get that in direct conversations or maybe in a workplace harassment scenario. What are you supposed to think about that? But it works. Every targeted individual out there is going to tell you the same thing. It was aggressive. It was obvious. It was in my face. And then all of a sudden, when I got a body cam or put up a security system, this whole thing changed. Amazing. And then, but here's the problem that comes out of that is that, now you're walking around with one of those big box cams or something, and they're just going to say you're nuts. But, whatever. Do what you have to do. Hold on a minute. I'm still trying to get this dinner done. Hopefully there won't be too many more interruptions. Okay, I'm just looking through here. Joshua, welcome to the live stream. And I'm probably way back here. I'm looking for new people, but I just can't resist some of these comments. Okay, so this is kind of interesting. I'm going to put this up here. Sentinel says, the thing is, though they may think they aren't sadistic, but they get excited and energized seeing you in distress, angry or sad from what they are doing. Yeah, well, yeah, well, that's part of the gaslighting, because anytime you see someone do something, they're doing it for a reason. Don't BS yourself. A nice way of putting it. Don't deceive yourself. When someone does something, sometimes people are being manipulated. Sometimes people are just kind of bouncing around, bouncing off the walls. But when it comes to something like this, there's a motive. There's a calculation. There's a collusion. There's purpose. There's science. Oh, they seem like they're getting something out of it, all right. But if they cannot control you, well, they're not going to get nothing, are they? And as in the comments, when they see you distressed, when they see you, in that circular thinking, I've talked about that before when it comes to targeting individuals within this framework, is when you try to get your life back, when you try to remedy all these, you can't control what other people are going to do. They throw you into the game dynamic, right? The game theory, and they start playing games with you, and they lead you around within that framework. All you have to do is deny them what they're after. Playing stupid is I mean, it's so easy to do, but it's genius. They hate that. If you're a new target or an individual out there, you're dealing with directed conversations. You're dealing with what we've talked about, sensitization, where individuals will be sensitized to stimuli in their environment, where they will form associations amalgamated within the framework of their psyche, to where they are processing information in a different way. They want you to read into these things. They want to accuse you of calling out legitimate perps with that plausible deniability, right? And they want you to internalize the accusation that you're just paranoid. We talked about that earlier. Gaslighting 101. And if in case you're not following along with this, is that this whole thing works together, right? I mean, you're attacked, You deal with a trauma invasion. You might be confused at first. You might experience fear and then paranoia and then frustration, but you are moving into that framework. You are moving into being reprogrammed, right? They want to take you from confusion to dysfunction, from anticipation to accusation to internalization, that somehow you're just reading into all these things that I mentioned before. The roller coaster of harassment for targeted individuals is not something that you experience over a weekend. This is not something that you're just going to be dealing with for 5 months or 6 months or 2 months or whatever, or 2 years, or maybe even beyond that, because they will change the stimuli for that max gaslighting effect. And in the meantime, you're being broken down, you're being demoralized, and you're experiencing the exponential effect of that isolation and gaslighting. I'm going to go back into the comments here. They want you to believe their lies. They want you to start questioning yourself. That's gaslighting 101. If they start switching it up and they use that plausible deniability, eventually you're going to read into something. And I've mentioned that before. As a targeted individual, forgive yourself, move on, realize the science that you're dealing with, and remember that, one of the main things, and even the kingdom of darkness will use this, is because it's a basic equation. You have to live with yourself. You have to live with you. And when they use accusation methodology against you, and sometimes they'll play God with targets, as if God is, he's got to be doing it. He could stop it, couldn't he, Billy? Well, yeah, he could stop it, but he's not stop. Well, that means that he wants it to happen. No, it doesn't mean that. It doesn't mean that. They'll try to convince the target of that. And then the accusations and the environmental tyranny that they're dealing with, they'll assume that he's all good with it. He must be, because he's letting it happen. I'll tell you what. No, he isn't. He never will be. God is very predictable, good, righteous, dwells in perfect light, and he wants you to be saved, and he has good intentions for you. And in the Bible, it's very clear when it says that he is patient, not willing that any should perish, but desires all to come to the knowledge of the truth and repentance. Right? Very, 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 very clear communication of what you can expect from him. But of course, the environment is going to be different from that, isn't it? And what is that? That's that you got to live with yourself. And so if you have someone accusing you, what do you do? You gotta justify yourself and accuse them. You got to condemn them. And think about it. This is in reverse, because targeted individuals, think about this. If you're one of those targets who's dealing with that harassment in your family, and you've been dealing with it, and you finally didn't react, you figured it out, you didn't play into it, and now you're rising. Now you've seen the patterns, you've seen the inconsistencies, and you're not being manipulated anymore. They're not affecting you. Now they're intimidated of you. You don't have to go no contact anymore. They can't even they can't look you in the eye, because they're lying. And they've got to what? They've got to bastardize you. They've got to villainize you to what? Same equation. To justify themselves. A lot of targets out there, and I've talked about this, going no contact with a narcissist or a family member or a stalker, is that they have lost control. They have lost power over you. And the last thing that they expected was you to wake up and figure this out, because they wanted complete 100% control over your emotions and over your mind. You were their little puppet. That's what they did. You're going to be our little puppet. But it didn't work, did it? And what do they got to do now? Well, you don't know. And that's the frightening aspect of confronting a narcissist or one of these predators, even if they're family members, because now they got to bury the evidence. right? Now they got to bury you. A lot of targets are threatened with that, where they believe they're running for their life, and then it gets up beyond that, and now there's just, what are they going to do? They've lost their edge. There's no more plausible deniability. They've gone beyond that, and I've talked about that before with targets. If you're dealing with this whole thing and you don't react, and they're trying to gaslight you, what's your job? It's like a bad game of Jenga. You start stacking it up. You stack it up to the left. You stack it up to the right. You stack it wherever you can, and you try to hold it in. And they start accusing, and they start playing games, and they start trying to use plausible deniability, but you're ignoring them, and they're not getting what they want. They're getting more aggressive. They start doing this. They start doing that, and pretty soon they run out of options. And sooner or later, it's obvious. It is so obvious that no one can deny it. Now it's over. There's no more games now. They can't convince you you're crazy anymore. And I've mentioned that when you don't react to these methods, when you don't react to their little, game that they're playing with you, they have to get aggressive. They destroy themselves because they completely wreck the plausible deniability within that gaslighting framework used to isolate and manipulate targeted individuals. I'm going to go back into the comments. Frank, welcome to the live stream. Okay, he's talking about the cults out there. Okay. All right, I'm way back in the comments. And Precise Diff says advanced tech. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Ali Yesamino, welcome to the live stream. I think they pronounced that right. If I didn't, I apologize. Okay. Just looking through here. Oh, targeted Patton. You came in here at 11. Sorry, I'm about half an hour behind. Welcome to the live stream, and Merry Christmas to you as well. Well, Targeted Patton says, sorry I missed the last live stream. Don't worry about it, brother man. You can always watch me on the rerun. Okay, well, we're moving on along. Techno Kid. And Techno Kid says that Jesus was born in September. Why? That's what the NASA star charts are saying. That's correct. Welcome to the live stream, by the way, and God bless you. Hopefully you're doing well. And if not, you will have peace eventually. And I've mentioned before that when targets, you deal with some pretty intense stuff out there, and they will use holidays, guys. They will use all kinds of your day off or whatever. Talked about targets dealing with harassment at apartment complexes or whatever. It seems like they know, and you take a day off and you get noise campaigns or whatever. It's like, really? 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 You will experience peace. And I like to put a prayer out there for all targets who are dealing with that type of harassment and dysregulation, that they would have peace supernaturally and rest in the name of the Most High. Okay. All right. Let's see what else we got out here. And peace on earth says, was the star of Bethlehem a supernova? No, it was not. It was the convergence of Jupiter and Regulus. And that was the king star when you get in Revelations 12. We had something similar in 2023. And I think that was that in August? Was it August 23rd or something like that? I can't remember when it was. But it was similar to what happened, but it wasn't. A lot of people thought the rapture was going to happen at that time. And we can go into that, but that's a whole nother ball of wax. But the return of the Lord, or what Paul referenced in 2 Thessalonians, that regarding the day of the Lord and our gathering to him, or the return of the Lord and our gathering to him, do not be deceived, do not be shaken by word, letter, or spirit. Right? Why? Because that day shall not happen until first there is a falling away, and that lawless one, that man of sin, will be revealed. That's the Antichrist. What's he talking about? Well, specifically, he's talking about the Jewish people. That's who the 144,000 are, by the way, in case you're wondering that. And when you get into the prophecies of the Bible, you'll understand those things. And that's what Paul was talking about when he said, and all Israel will be saved. Who's that? The individuals who haven't taken the mark of the beast and are still alive at the return of the Lord. Those who have been taught by God and of the prophets, because you'll have the false prophet up there on the mount, the Temple Mount, called down fire from heaven to deceive the Jews. And that's the apostasia, or the falling away, referenced by Paul in 2 Thessalonians. It will be done in accordance with the work of the enemy in lying signs and wonders. And they're gonna, the Jews are looking for a sign, right? And so that's part of that framework and part of that cosmic geography. When you look at, what is happening over in the Middle East, a lot of people aren't going to recognize it. It's going to be like the days of Noah. Not that people are turning into, amalgamated half human, half angels or machines. Is that people are not going to be aware, and sudden destruction will come. People will be marrying and giving in marriage, right? And sudden destruction, like the days of Noah. He was a preacher of righteousness, building a boat in his backyard, and everybody just basically ridiculed him. And on that very day, when the floods came, when the aquifers of the deep broke forth and the rain came down from the heavens, they banged on the doors of the ark. They pleaded for him to let them, but it was sealed up. And it will be similar at the end of the tribulation of those days, spoken about by the prophet Daniel, right? The abomination of desolation, the tribulation spoken about in Revelations, the 3.5 year period. And after that, then the sun, the moon will be darkened. And the return of the Lord, the great and terrible day of the Lord, will be at hand. It'll be too late. And it will take them by surprise, because they're looking for somebody out of Europe who's going to make the whole world take a mark. And some of the people in the secret societies believe those things. And I went into that earlier, talking about the mythos of that polytheism within Freemasonry, the Illuminati, the Rosicrucians, the Committee of 300, the Council of 33. They believe this stuff. When you get into this exponential framework that targets talk about, they believe it. It's like astrology. And I've had that happen to me 20, 30 years in advance. One of these individuals will tell me, I'm going to see you on this day. It's, if you ever watched that movie, Needful Things, and you have Leland Gaunt, who played the devil in there, and, he tells that guy, well, I'm going to see you on, it'll be a sunny day, and, we're going to have they're outside of space-time. They get information from a dimensional perspective, and they deceive these individuals within that destiny mythos and get them to believe that they are the architect of the universe the archons, the monad, whatever. There's different ways of looking at this whole thing. And it works that way. It's very deceptive. It's very effective. And it takes people into that propositional tyranny where they will internalize these things, getting back into the gaslighting. Sudden destruction. You don't want to be a gang stalker when the Lord returns. It's all over at that point. And I mentioned before that what are they after? You're a commodity. You have the opportunity for eternal life. Eternal life. That's a long time, right? They get something out of this. And if there wasn't something they could get out of it, they wouldn't be after you. Remember that. Be diligent. Seek the Lord. Okay. And I'm just looking through there. Oh, Nicholas, welcome to the live stream. We have a moderator here. Great to have you in here, Nick. Merry Christmas. Love you, brother. And Peace on Earth says, they are cursed. In Deuteronomy, it says, one is attacked covertly, they are cursed. Yeah, well, people who, they're breaking all the laws of the universe. Absolutely. It's a good point. It's a great point. Actually, when you get into the culpability and all these things, it's not everybody's working for money. Not everybody is, within a government program either. And some of this stuff, like I said, when you get into the whole mythos about the spiritual vampires and all that kind of thing, they're working for their handlers and they're getting regulated. And the handlers are using them to take you out, to take other people out, to create that environmental tyranny that will deceive the masses, as it says in 2 Corinthians 4:4, to blind the minds of the world to the glorious gospel of Christ. And even when you get into the religious community out there, a lot of target individuals talk about being gang stalked within church. And it's the same thing going on there. The wolves have creeped in. Acts 20, Paul told everybody that when I leave, and he was the last apostle, wolves will creep in, not sparing the flock, introducing destructive heresies and doctrines of demons. And they will use that type of environmental tyranny and subjection. And, it's just like what targets deal with. You're the odd person out. And then you're supposed to believe God doesn't love you. You're supposed to believe all these lies. You're supposed to internalize the gaslighting, because that accusation methodology comes into play, is where you have to accuse and condemn everyone else, whether you understand who it is or not, just to justify yourself so you can live with yourself. But like I said before, exponentially, the individuals who are doing this to you, they have to villainize you to justify what they're doing, even though they know it's not true. Many targets they don't even have a record. They don't have any criminal record at all. There's other targets out there who do. And then I've mentioned this, that even if that's the case, there's no legal right for them to do these things, along with the fact that they all need mercy. And of course, Jesus was very explicit. Don't judge lest you be judged. Does that mean that you cannot discern if somebody is worthy of your attention or your company? No, that's not what it is. Do not persecute or judge someone, but leave room for repentance. Be gracious as you want grace to come to you, right? Do they need grace? Oh, they need it. Oh yes. Yeah, they're going to need it. but they've denied themselves by denying you, and they persecuted you. Bad scenario. That's not going to work out. I'm going to guarantee. They always say that to you. How's that working out for you? It's better than what's going to work out for you. Because now they have to villainize you. There's targets out there trying to figure out, why these people are so obsessed. Don't think for a minute that, these spiritual handlers, they don't care about the puppets. They don't care about them. They're devouring them. They're not friends. A lot of these people in witchcraft or in Satanism or other things, they're my, they love me. They're together. You're the one that's, and it's like, no, they're laughing. You're nothing more than another chicken strip in the chicken factory for them. They don't care about you. They don't care about you. They just want to use you to get to everybody else. They know what they're doing. This is business. It's about, it's almost like a buffet of souls. And they'll use whoever they can to get it. Be quiet, because they have to at this point. And the Bible is very clear when you deal with the disembodied spirits, which I've talked about before. And by the way, I have a lot of these videos up on the playlist describing what these entities are. They're hunters. And they have a motive. And it's no different than when you sit down to a meal, and that's what you are to them. That's what they are. And the delusion is that they're going to win, and that you can violate that legal framework and prosper. But it seems like it. That's part of the delusion. That's, if there's targets out there who are being gang stalked at church, and I've talked about that, it looks like it's working out for all these people, the false teachers, the charlatans. I'm not going to mention their names. You don't have to. They got, what, $100,000, $1 million, $100 million, $1 billion. They've had ministries for 40, 50 years. How's that working? Well, I thought it said in the Word of God that false teachers would come to a swift destruction. That involves when the apostles were there, and Peter, if you remember what Jesus told him, he said, you will loose and bind. And boy, if those guys would have came out and tried to preach back when the apostles were there, they would have been taken down quick. Do you remember what Paul did to Simon the sorcerer? That stuff doesn't happen anymore. Okay. And like I said, guys, there's going to be one more interruption. I'm going to have to just hold on. It should be quick. I have to get to dinner and make sure this doesn't burn. Hold on. Just about there, guys. Hold on. Okay, sorry about that. As I said before, if we ever take this channel to the next level, we'll have maybe some bumper music and some other things going on, including some call-ins or maybe a link that people can come in. As I said before, with rules, because I don't want to expose the identity of individuals or even the things about their harassment that would compromise them, and you have to take the safety of the target individual into consideration. And that's always bothered me about some of the channels out there where you got to show your face for credibility. It's like, what? I don't have to prove anything to you or not. You either going to take my word for it or you're not. It's like when the Bible talks about people swearing oaths and whatever. It's like, are you some kind of idiot? You want me to swear on my mother's grave or something? Just either you're going to believe me or you're not going to believe me. Okay. Coercion, gaslighting. And some of these channels out there are PSYOP channels. I'm not going to mention who they are, but they always have that thing in common where you got to show your face and tell everybody what's going on. It's like, whatever. I don't agree with it. One more interruption. Hold on. All right. Okay. And I'm probably way back in the comments here still. Well, we're getting there. We are getting there. Annie Richards, welcome to the live stream. Okay. And Frank says false prophet Elon. Well, I don't. No, he's not the false prophet. Elon Musk is an atheist, as far as I know. Maybe he's not. Maybe I am wrong. Maybe I'm misrepresenting him. I apologize. Very intelligent individual, and I hope that he reconsiders his stance on Christianity. But I'm going to tell you this right now. We are not going into outer space. We are not going to be inhabiting Mars. We are not going to be on some type of Star Trek episode traversing the cosmos. A 1,000 years from now or whenever. And I've talked about that before. When you get into maybe the Dead Sea Scrolls are wrong. I don't know. But all the things that line up in prophecy, and I've mentioned all those things, is I really don't think it's that far away. And people will talk about what Christ said concerning the fig tree. When you see that, you know that summer is near. It's right at the door. It's all lined up, guys. And I've mentioned before that when you get into what I talked about earlier concerning, the lunar calendar and the solar calendar. And so the Jews or the Pharisees, specifically the Sadducees, adopted that lunar calendar, the lunar calendar, and they couldn't calculate the time seasons, the feast days, or the prophecies. But the desolations determined coming down from the prophet Jeremiah started in 605 BCE, right? And that's when the prophecies came to Jeremiah. The destruction of the temple was in 586 BCE. They brought sacrifices up to the high places until 583 BCE. The decree went out 538 BCE for them to go back to the Holy Land or the cosmic geography or that area over in the Middle East that they're still at now, that same place, same cosmic geography. But the problem is that they had lived there for 70 years. They had to liquidate their businesses. They had to organize a 1,000-mile journey, and they didn't get back till 5:36. What's my point? Do the math, right? 7 times 360 is 2,520 times 0.9857 is 2,484. Minus 536 is exactly 1948. Is that a coincidence? We're not that far away, guys. We are right at the edge of midnight. And no matter what kind of plans that the New World Order has, or the occult, or the age of Aquarius or Pisces, or any other delusion that's out there, we are headed for the return of the Lord, the great and terrible day of the Lord, that we must pray to be worthy to escape the wrath to come. And as a lot of you have mentioned, that these people who are involved in this, they're violating those laws. They are violating that, and they are taking themselves out of that framework to where God can even have it. They have to deal with God. It's not like you can just walk in and, get some water sprinkled on you or something, and it's just, okay, everything's fine now. A lot of people have a type of Protestant delusion that way. And it's not to say that Christ didn't take the penalty. You don't have to earn forgiveness. But God is not just going to let these things go. You're going to have to deal with him, and you're going to have to be genuinely, honestly repentant concerning what you have done. And you're also going to have to deal with the onslaught of them, just like the target did. And they're not going to want to do that. That's how people are bound up in that whole thing. I'm going to go back into the comments. And I'm going to go all the way up to the end and see what we're dealing with. Okay. JSD 7502, welcome to the live stream. Okay. All right. New Neo, welcome to the live stream. You guys are talking about cooking now. Hilarious. I don't claim to be a good cook. I get it done. That's about Bing Bong, Bing Kinko. Have a good Christmas. But you showed up. That's good. All right. Oh, Yabalzi is here. Let's see what he's talking about here, or she. Sorry about that. I'm assuming it's not a she. Let's see. You had to go out with the family. Okay, we'll just leave that one alone. We know. I know how it is. Lord be a lamp unto my feet. Welcome to the live stream. Okay. All right. Okay. Well, we've talked about a lot of things. We've talked about what targets deal with. And of course, it's the holidays again. It's Christmas. For the corporate world, they're selling products. They're making all kinds of money. It's nothing more than an advertising campaign. For individuals who are dealing with exponential gaslighting, they're the odd person out. And if the family's involved, they've got to demonize you to justify themselves, right? And there's no getting out of it. It's science. It's all it is. And some people are getting paid, and some people are just idiots. Some people are getting manipulated. But once they do that, rather than to admit their guilt, rather than to fess up that they fell short, rather than to apologize to you with honesty and admit that they did what they did. I didn't do that. I didn't say that. What are you talking about? They have to justify themselves and bastardize you so that they don't have to deal with the guilt of that, along with the environmental tyranny, that cabal, the Borg, the demonic hive, the government program, whoever is involved in your scenario. They don't want to do that. They don't want to take responsibility for this whole thing. They eventually will. And I've talked about that before, that don't believe that. Don't believe the lie that these individuals are going to be getting away with this whole thing. They are not going to get away with it. Mark my words. I'll bet any amount of money, period. And I've mentioned this before. There are a lot of things that I could be wrong about. There are a lot of things that I talk about that are controversial. There are a lot of things that I deal with on this channel where people will say, well, you're wrong. You're going to find out you're wrong. Maybe. But I know damn well I'm not wrong about that. And targets will deal with this whole thing for decades, maybe even their whole life. And they are confronted with it, with that exponential amalgamated framework where they are triggered exponentially. And the injustice builds, the tension increases. And for some people, like I said before, within 2 to 5 years, they can't take it. They do something. I have to have justice. You already have it. You've already won. They are the losers. Period. Doesn't look like it, though. It looks as if they are getting away with it. It looks as if they are prospering. But thank God you're not like them. Thank God. And one day, in the near future, you are going to realize that you made the right choice and they made the wrong choice. And that the momentary benefits of their conformity, of whatever is going on in your scenario, is going to be, well, there's a heavy price to pay, period. And I've talked about the fact that, within the binary system we're in, darkness, light, friend, enemy, good, evil, they have chosen. They have made that choice. But they are going to try to villainize you to justify themselves. Don't believe it. I've mentioned the solutions of gangstalking and the contradictions involved in this whole thing is that it's exponential in the sense that they are obfuscating their activity. They are lying about what they're doing. It's against the law. It's obviously against the law. But they're so confident, right? Simplify your life. Live above reproach. Don't give them any opportunity to further bastardize your reputation upon the smear campaign or whatever is going on in your scenario. Don't react. Don't give an inch. Make them become aggressive to kill the plausible deniability and gaslighting. Realize you are dealing with deprivation methodology, similar to MK Ultra, where they isolated people or limited or completely cut off the stimuli coming at the individual within that type of experiment, using emotional manipulation, psychic driving, repetitive themes and subjection, environmental tyranny to critique and invade the psyche of the victim. You've already won. All you have to do is put one foot in front of the other and simplify your life. Don't play into the game theory. Don't play into the game dynamic of this whole thing, because that's what they want. Why? Because you will inevitably become emotional and they will control you. through your emotions, believing their lies, focusing on the environmental tyranny. And I've talked about that before. Watch the videos, do something else, improve your life. Study something that can improve your financial situation. Look at things you can do with your health, things that you have control over. Don't worry about it. They're going to try and draw you into that whole thing. And we're winning. What are you going to do about it? No, you're losing. You are losing. Remember, they are losing. You are winning. It just does not appear that way. And that is the test of faith. I'd like to thank everyone who subscribed, like this video, share it, hype this video. God bless you if you're out there dealing with intense persecution in this holiday. It happens to targets, and they'll do that. They will target you on those days, on your birthday, on the holidays, because they know that framework is set up and it's there for max manipulation and gaslighting as you are dealing with the isolation of the subjection of your environmental tyranny. I'd like to thank all our moderators. God bless. Be good to yourselves. Be safe.